So now when I shoot waves, I'm very particular. I may go out and shoot for 2 hours and completely trash the whole entire session. Like I'll go through my computer and delete.
Yeah.
Not a keeper.
Yep.
For me, I'm more about, now that I do it, as a business, I'm all about quality and not quantity.
Welcome to the Salt Sessions, Mr. Beau Johnston. Thanks for coming on, brother.
Nice to be here, man.
First, straight up, I just want to say, like, your photography is just sensational. It's like every time I see a new image come up on Instagram, I'm just absolutely like blown away. So I'm super excited to be like chatting to you about it and find out all about it. I think maybe like definitely one of the first images I saw of yours is the one that you call Panthera or Pantera, something like that. And that is just like absolutely nuts. And it's just, but even like image after image, just so crisp and just like insane colors and contrast. It's like really, really cool stuff, man. So I'm like super excited to have you on, and yeah, I'll be able to showcase a few of them throughout the interview as well. So if anyone hasn't seen your stuff, then I'm sure that they'll know all about it now and love it. So just to start off with, I guess, can you just give us a bit of a background? Like, where are you from? How did you get into photography? Was it always a plan, or how did it come about?
So yeah, I'm from Orange County, California, Southern California. Live in a town called Irvine. Pretty much was born and raised in Orange County, California. I did spend a little time in Texas in my late teens, early 20s. So I went straight from coastal beach guy, being in the water every day, to small town Texas, middle of nowhere, no ocean. Yeah, so it was a culture shock, but it was a good culture shock because I got to kind of see outside of what we call the Orange County bubble and kind of experience a different lifestyle, which was good. Anyway, back to the photography part. Photography was definitely never part of some grand scheme of my life. It was something that I picked up a film camera when I was in high school and messed around with it a little bit. Nothing ocean related, just landscape stuff. But that was just for a brief moment. That was, again, in high school. Fast forward to my late 20s, I'm 41 now. I picked up a GoPro through a friend of mine and was like, hey, let's go and shoot the surf, whatever. The waves aren't that great to bodyboard. Let's go mess around with the GoPro. And that basically is where it started. It started with the GoPro, I believe, 3.
Yeah, wow.
And it turned into, okay, let's share this on Instagram. It started, gaining traction back when Instagram was kind of, legit Instagram. It's a completely different animal now.
Yeah.
That's a whole different subject.
Yeah, it's a whole different beast. Yeah.
So yeah, it was, eventually it turned into GoPro, and then me, I'm very competitive. I want to progress with whatever I do. And so the GoPro turned into a regular mirrorless camera via the Sony. And I just wanted to get better and better. And I saw several other wave photographers at the time. I think Warren Keelan was one of the ones I really looked up to. Really,
his calendar just there.
He's definitely one of the innovators for as far as me wanting to emulate surf wave art. And then it just really became what I liked, what I wanted to see. I see things. Sometimes there are accidents. Some things starts out as accidents. It's like, okay, I'm shooting this wave, but what's this little thing down in the corner? Let me focus on that. And then just messing around and then getting your compositions and stuff like that. And then it just became something fun, a hobby. And then it turned into a full-time job, which is what I do now.
Awesome.
It's how I make a living. It's not an extravagant living, but I'm doing something I love. And hey, why not?
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, I got a few questions from that. So you mentioned the bodyboarding. So is that what you were doing beforehand?
Yeah. So I've been on a bodyboard. I mean, we've all been on a boogie board, bodyboard, whatever you want to call it, since our parents took us down the ocean, right? My dad used to take me down the ocean, and I would be in the water all day long, and I would have a bodyboard. I even had skags on my bodyboard. That's how much kook I was. Didn't realize you don't really need specs for your bodyboard, right? And like the same thing with photography, I get, competitive. I want to progress. So I started getting into bodyboarding. I started doing it. And she's like, oh, don't you want to surf? Don't you want to stand up? Like, no, I dig this. I want, heavy shore break barrels, like the wedge and stuff like that. I'm kind of a big guy. I'm like 6 foot, I'm like 225 pounds at the time. I'm heavier now because I don't bodyboard. I don't work out as much as I should. So. But yeah, that's kind of where the bodyboarding went to. And then again, when I picked up the GoPro and got in the water with it, and I saw what you could do and the art of it and how much fun it was, I was like, okay, this is cool too. And then I started having some issues with my back, probably from bodyboarding, heavy, ledgy, doing rolls at the end section at wedge and trying to land them.
Wow.
Getting shoulder problems, getting low back problems from that.
Yeah.
I started leaning more towards the photography part of it and still getting the same amount of stoke from, what I would get from bodyboarding. So eventually, once I saw that, bodyboarding really was never really going to go anywhere as far as money wise, being able to support myself and vice versa. I saw, some people started asking about, can I buy a print? Can I buy this? Can I buy that? I didn't really think too much of it. And then eventually it just turned into like, okay, people want, to spend $5,000 on a 40 by 90 inch metal. I'm like, well, I must be doing something right. Because someone's cracking out their wallet for that, I'm like, all right, let me see if I can dig into this and do something with it. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Was definitely the intro into what my wave surf art is now.
Do you remember any times when you were bodyboarding and in those situations, like did photography, was it ever something like in maybe the back of your mind? Were you ever like bodyboarding and ever kind of think like, oh, it'd be amazing to be able to like capture this stuff that I'm seeing? Or was it just you were a bodyboarder and then you just picked up a camera and it was sort of a black and white sort of transition?
I think it was just that. I think it was a black and white transition. I don't think when I was out there, I was thinking about that. Like I said, I have a competitive, I was in team sports growing up. So I was really into competitive sports on like a real high level. And for me, when I would bodyboard, unfortunately, I think it took the fun out of it a little bit. I was really competitive. I'm like, all right, I want to get on this wave. I want to, basically go out there and work. And so I think that mindset didn't allow me to think of anything but that, which is one of the reasons why I love that, because you can literally, the world could be on fire around you, but you get in the water and you focus just on that. And that's all that matters.
Yeah.
And so I've transferred that same focus into photography.
Yeah. That's
all that matters when I'm in the water. It's just like focus, nail the shot, and then all the stresses that I'm dealing with externally in the world. Just awesome. So to me, what I call my Zen time. It's my you can call it meditation, Zen, your church, place where you go to just release. Yeah,
that's amazing. So being that you like, it's quite interesting because you sound like very similar to myself. I've got a very similar background in competitive sports, and same thing, like when I got into photography, like I wasn't supposed to get into photography. Like I didn't know any photographers or have any photography in my family, but I just got into it and just went like hard at it. So did you, when you got into it, did you study it in any way, or what was your kind of like, were you interested in like learning the, like composition, like all of the elements? Because I kind of got like right into it and just sort of learn everything to the point where now like I teach it because I'm just so like fascinated by all the aspects of it. So was that something for you?
Again, started with the GoPro. So literally you just had to be in the right spot at the right time and press a button and then point it out and shoot it. So there wasn't like your shutter speed, your aperture, your ISO. I mean, there was a little bit, but again, it was a fixed wide angle. So it really wasn't a good teacher on how to use photography as like a weapon, basically. Dial in this, that, and use a camera manually. That was something I had to figure out on my own. So once I actually graduated from the GoPro and got my first, Sony mirrorless camera, I was like, okay, shutter speed. What does this do? What does aperture do? And, I Googled things. I asked people stuff like that, and eventually you just figure it out. It's like when you get a new toy, when you get a new cell phone, or you switch over to a new TV or a new computer. I'm the type of guy that will press buttons and figure out what this button does and what that does. And sometimes you might mess something up along the way, but in the end, you learn. That's how I learned. That's how I learned, is through trial and error.
Yeah, just doing. Yeah.
And then like if something more, I don't know, niche, like this doesn't really apply to in the water photography, but like focus stacking. It's like I hear like, what is focus stacking? How does that apply? And so I try it. I'm like, this is a pain in the butt. I gotta take a photo here, it's this, that, and then I gotta bring in the Photoshop. I don't know how to use Photoshop. It's like you gotta watch YouTube and all that stuff. And I just like that. That's what I liked about the waves. It was just like, it's so simple. You just go out there, you swim, you put yourself in the right place. You did the homework before, like the swell's up, the wind's right, tide's right, the intervals are right, all those variables. I mean, obviously that from a surf background, that's not a big deal because you already know those things.
Yeah.
Trying to score waves as a surfer or a bodyboarder. Obviously from someone who's a photographer and they've never done that before, but they're really good at landscape photography or sports photography or whatever the genre is, they're going to listen to that and be like, whoa, that's a different ball game. But for us, like who grew up in the surf, we're like, no big deal.
That's what it is. Yeah. Are you selective about the like conditions that you go out in? Like, you kind of looking for certain conditions, or is there just times you'll just go and just see what happens?
Yeah, I mean, the first condition that I think all photographers would look for is the light.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's overcast, you can only take so many black and white photos. I mean, not black and white photos at all. I do them too, but you're looking for that light. And so with the ocean, it's like, okay, is it partly cloudy? Is it completely clear? Is it mostly cloudy? Like, is there a chance? So that's the first thing I usually look for, is what is the sky doing? Next would be the wind. The wind on the ocean surface, really, it's a two thing. It's a wind, locally wind, just deciphers whether the surf is going to be clean, offshore, onshore, crumbly, mushy. I'm always looking for clean, either offshore groomed or glass, like just glass.
Yeah.
Wind, on the other hand, is good if it's way out to sea and it's blowing the waves in. Okay, so that's the two things with wind. I mean, wind creates our surf from storms, stuff like that. So like it's kind of like a double-edged sword in that sense. Yeah.
Are you shooting like if you're on the west, are you shooting morning as well as evening there? Is there enough light in the morning to shoot?
So here I primarily shoot sunrise. That's my
jam. Okay. Yeah.
Get up early, chase the light in the morning. There's not a lot of people around. You don't run into crowds. Places, the beaches here line up pretty good where I'm at with the sunrise, so we get a good either parallel sun, so the light parallels with the coast.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Or it's a little side off.
Yep.
Never really gets right in front, like unless you're down south a little bit or up north. But where I'm at, there's certain angles of the beach that I'm looking for certain times of the year, depending on where the sun is. That certain spots are better, like say in the winter, certain spots are better in the summer. So so your understanding of the light, but like it probably seems quite second nature to you now, but that's one of the things that you can definitely see in your photography. Like I'm a kind of a bit of a student of all of this stuff, and I really like obsess over it, and like the light's something that I'm like obsessed with, and you do that really, really well. There is a lot of, there's a lot of cameras out there, a lot of GoPros. It's like, it's a pretty, cheap hobby compared to what it used to be. And there's a lot of people just taking photos of a wave, but without really considering the light. So is that something that you, once again, just built through the trial and error when you went out there? Obviously the conditions to shoot in you would know from your bodyboarding, but the first time you started to see some photos like on the back of your screen, or like when you brought them home and had a look and see how the light hit waves, was that something that sort of came about that way? Oh yeah, of course. There'd be times where, I'd be shooting in the same session. If I'm shooting one way, it looks amazing. And then I get home, I'm like, I shoot the other way, it looks, kind of muted and not so good. So that was kind of where it all started, was like, okay, if I shoot this direction, how's it look? If I shoot this direction, how's it look? But
Yeah.
that can change within 30 minutes here.
Yeah.
It's like you get a sunrise, you get that burn, that initial burn. And then once the sun gets up over the horizon, you get that direct light. It might be good for about 20, 30 minutes, and then it just gets too intense.
Yeah.
Then if I start shooting the other direction and there's some clouds over there, then it lights the clouds up and all that stuff. So really just got to be paying attention to your surroundings, and test shooting too. I mean, you want to test shoot and look at what you're doing and like, okay, that looks cool. And that doesn't look cool. So especially if there's a lot of clouds going on, your light's changing constantly, and you might want a few of the auto functions on your camera, so you don't miss a shot because it's too dark because you're shooting the opposite direction before.
No, that's cool. It's fascinating. Yeah, because I think it's as I said, it's probably second nature to you now, but it's one of the things that I kind of see a lot that, you know, I think that people should really be focusing on like a lot more, even though it feels like the most obvious thing that light makes a photo. It's like the way it does work and the angles, and like you said, like looking either direction is like a super important thing. So I think for people listening that are maybe even just getting into photography, it's like it's such an important part of it. So you're shooting, so you said that you shoot at the wedge, you bodyboarded there, but are you photographing there as well?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
During the summer, the south swells are hitting us.
Yeah. So what's that experience like? Like for people over here, we're just watching, you know, the YouTube videos of that. It looks pretty intense. Obviously, you've had experience bodyboarding it, so maybe you've got a bit more experience of how to deal with it. But like, what's the experience like? And is there any preparation required for it? Is it straight fitness? Do you need to have sort of mental preparation to kind of go out? I guess I'm thinking like the bigger days that kind of you see, but.
So that wave breaks pretty close to the shore. So you're not going to really ever have to worry about getting deep hole downs or anything like that. So, but then again, the sand's real close to the wave. If you get drilled right, you're going right in the sand. I've actually had 2 severe ankle injuries at that spot.
Wow. Okay.
To where, you know, got drilled into the sand because of it, because my fin got caught in the sand, and then I ended up torquing around it and popping an ankle. And then one time was another fin in the sand, and then went forward, popped the ankle. So and I know and heard of several people breaking their necks. I've heard of several people dying. It's a gnarly spot, but growing up riding it, I know the ins and out of it, the mechanics of it. Just like some dude who anybody who surfs pipe, it's like they know the mechanics, they know where to paddle in, like what the current's doing, stuff like that. I don't know pipe at all. I don't know. I've seen it a couple times. I bodyboarded it when it was real small, but like the way that you go to your local break or whatever, you learn it. You learn it's ebb and flow. It's power, where to be, where not to be, where like, okay, I'm in trouble sort of thing. I've had a couple of those moments, one in particular when I was bodyboarding where I thought I was gonna die, you know, like you were like, oh, I was gonna die, you know, but this was one of those things where like you're saying your goodbyes, and like you're letting your body go limp, and like you're like, you're dead. I'm done. Like I'm done. I'm going. And then you don't, and then you're like, wow, okay. You have any respect after that. Like if you make all that, and then it's like, okay, I need to, how do I not let that happen again? You know, I learned from my mistake and getting caught in a situation where that doesn't happen again, because I came really close to biting the dust. And that's one of those places where that can happen. You know, it can happen when it's small, and it can happen when it's big. Actually, more people get hurt when it's like small, medium than when it's big. That I come to find out.
That's interesting. Because maybe they're not as cautious or take a few more chances or something like that. So you tend to take it for granted. A lot of the guys say that about pipeline as well. The same kind of thing. Maybe it's just you just like a little bit more lax in concentration or something, because like you said, you can get to know the spots if you know there, but also there's you know, if you get in the wrong spot, they can both punish you as opposed to a lot of standard just beach breaks, you know.
Definitely.
So
I mean, that's the wedge. That's the wedge. I mean, it's a shore break. It's heavy, it's powerful. I think pound for pound, it's not the most powerful wave here in Southern California.
Okay.
But it's one of them. And everybody knows Kiki in Hawaii, right? Park Little Zone.
Yeah.
I've shot short break there a couple times when it's been not massive, but big, right? Like large, extra large.
Yeah.
And when I compare the power to there to like some of the breaks here, that spot has infinite more power than anything I've experienced in Southern California.
Yeah. Wow. That's an interesting comparison that you've got to do both of them. Yeah.
I because when I got wrecked at Kiki at that spot, I was like, wow. I'm like, completely took it for granted. And that spot owned it owned me on one occasion. And I would like to go shoot it again, but with a different perspective.
Yeah. So all the more respect for Clark Little, huh?
Yeah. 100% for putting himself in the situations that he puts himself in that spot. 100% mad respect for him and the cojones he has to sit there, and anybody else for that matter. I mean, there's several guys there that do that.
Definitely. Yeah.
I mean, 100%.
So you mentioned that you're doing photography full time now. So I guess a few questions in that. So is it all print based?
Yeah, like 95% of it is all on large.
So you're not generally doing photo shoots. It's generally print sales.
No, I don't like photographing
people.
Cool.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And so,
friends and family maybe, but the wedding, no. Good God, no.
Yeah.
No.
So how's that been? Like, what was that process? Were you working a job before then, and then it became a process where you moved over into this thing now? And how was that experience for you? So I'm fascinated by kind of, someone working similar to me, like working a real job, so to speak, and then making a progression into photography in whatever form as a career, and especially like print sales is fascinating. So
yeah. So that's a great question. And it's funny how I evolved into what it is now. So right out of high school, I went to college for actually culinary arts. So I got my associate's degree in culinary arts. So I have an actual cooking background.
Yeah. Wow.
I was real creative with food. So I've always had that artistic knack. I did the food thing for about 7 to 8 years and decided it wasn't really for me. I like cooking, but I didn't like cooking in a professional, stressful environment for some reason.
That's fair. Yep.
And then I got into the fitness industry. I started doing personal training. I run my own outdoor fitness boot camps, and was actually doing really well with that up until, COVID reared its ugly head. Just ruined everything. So my industry got hit really bad. As it all around the world. I mean, if you were a service industry, you got wrecked. Whether restaurant, fitness, where you had to go indoors to do whatever you had to do. Because it got all shut down. Which
is crazy, hey? Because fitness is probably the thing that everyone should have been doing.
Hey, if you're healthy, you can survive this. Eating Twinkies every day, might not. Without COVID, that's how it works anyway.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother story. So during that time off with COVID, luckily the state I was in, they were very lenient with like giving people lots of money while this was going on. So I was able to survive during that and kind of compile money and kind of almost like, okay, well, people are still asking me for prints during the COVID and stuff like that. Why don't we just take this and just invest into that? And then literally just get on the high dive board and do a cannonball and let's just go for it. That's what happened. And I decided to just go full tilt boogie, and it really turned into, how am I going to show my audience physically and not just digitally? So obviously got the social media channels to show our work digitally and in a square this big or whatever. But it doesn't really do art justice. You need something back here that's a 40 by 60 to really, or it doesn't need to be that big, but bigger than a TV screen, bigger than a cell phone camera, to really appreciate art. Especially if it's large format. So I started doing art shows all over the place, whether it was local in Southern California. I did a bunch out of state in like Arizona, and just really put your art out there and let people look at it. And then people look at it, people
Yep.
sometimes will buy it. And so it goes from there. And you may make a contact with a person and they don't pull the trigger on a big piece until 5 years later. So it's just
Yeah.
really putting yourself out there,
Mm.
and name for yourself, and not just being a flash in the pan. And you just
Yep.
gotta, every great artist, whether, back through time, they've always just, that's what they did.
Mm.
And unfortunately, a lot of their art is worth more when they're dead. And unfortunately, that's how it works,
Yeah.
But this is how I got into it, and this is what I do with it now. I just schedule out shows and go out there and people my work, and some shows are great and some shows absolutely are a waste of time and money, and you go home and you're, wow, that was really a kick in the ego. So it's like Vegas, or gambling. Sometimes when you play cards, it's like sometimes the cards are in your favor, so they're not.
Yeah. No, I admire it, man. I did the same thing. Like, well, just in like our hometown, like for about 2 or 3 years, I did. We had a few markets here that they call them like outdoor markets, and I'd go and like set up the stands and everything. And it's a good way to kind of get known. And I was always fascinated because when you're in the world of photography and Instagram, you think that everyone knows every photographer that's out there. And I'd go and set up at the markets and be the only photographer, and people walk past and just buy a print off you because they hadn't heard of anyone else, or they didn't know anything. There's no comparison. Like the general public doesn't sit there comparing with the other photographers all day. So it's fascinating, the art show world, or the market. So yeah, and you got a pretty amazing setup. I've seen your stories. Like you seem to have like I guess if you're doing so many, you've got it done well. Like I remember so many stories of mine when there'd be like windy days and prints would be getting blown over and start raining. And it's just a
few horror stories with that too, man. I've almost lost every single metal piece in my booth because of that. But luckily it didn't happen.
Yeah, I remember
come back where my whole entire booth was completely flat like an accordion on the ground.
Oh wow.
Yeah. A 10 booth, and all my panels that all my art was hanging on was just completely flat on the ground. And I'm just thinking, I drive up to, I'm just sitting there like lots of bad language was coming out of my mouth. But when I went up to it, I was like, okay, if it's all dust, it's all dust. You just have to deal with it.
Yeah. No, yeah, 100% respect that, man, that you do all those shows and everything. I mean, the very first time I ever did one, I was like, the first time, so you're kind of a bit anxious about it all, and I wasn't sure what to print. I had some unframed things just like matted, which is fine, and then I had a couple of like smaller ones, and then there was one big print that I invested in to have framed and have there as like the centerpiece of the stall. And then before the market even started, I was setting up half an hour before, and a big gust of wind came through and like blew it off the table and smashed the whole frame. And that was before I'd even like started the first minute of a market. And I was just like, oh God. So then I learned how to bolt everything down and but no, it's fascinating. So based on that, that's what I wanted to find out about the print. So then is your mindset when you shoot now, are you shooting for print, or are you just looking at images afterwards and assessing what might work?
Making it a business took the fun out of a lot of it. So, because exactly what you just asked me there. Now when I shoot waves, not so much. Waves, it's kind of, it's a moving subject. So you just got to put yourself in the situation with your homework, what's the swell doing? What's the tide doing? What's the wind doing?
Yeah.
Get all those things, ducks in a row there, and then put yourself in that situation, and then hope that you're in the right spot. Especially if it's not a structure or point or a reef where the wave breaks, where the wave every single time.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't really have a lot of that out here. We just have wide open beach breaks. So you just really got to do your homework. Okay, where's the sandbars? Where's that and stuff like that. So now when I shoot waves, I'm very particular. I may go out and shoot for 2 hours and completely trash the whole entire session. Like I'll go through all my computer and delete.
Yeah.
Not a keeper. For me, I'm more about, now that I do it, as a business, I'm all about quality and not quantity. I'm not just throwing a picture up on my Instagram for likes and comments and stuff like that. I'm throwing it up there as a gallery. I'm throwing it up there as another source of people to go and look at it and go, okay, well, that I could see that up on my wall. I could see that, that could be something I would want to buy.
Yeah.
That's how I shoot. Unfortunately, now I'm looking for different compositions that are different than what I already have.
Yep.
Because if I already get the best shot I think I can get of a specific wave in a specific spot, I'm wasting my time if I keep going back there and trying to do the same thing over and over again.
Yep.
So I'm looking for something different. Okay, like this shot above me, I took this shot maybe 5 years ago. What makes it unique to me is I have a ton of this shot, but there's a full moon above it.
Yes.
So something like that. It's like, okay, can I put a moon in there without actually using Photoshop?
Yeah.
I actually really get that moon in there.
Yeah.
Even though there's no definition of the moon because it's impossible to get everything exposed properly in a moving subject like that. But what can I do differently to make it, and something simple as a little moon in there? I mean, that completely changes the whole entire composition. Landscape photography is a different thing. I also am into that too, but my passion's in the ocean. So
so do you know what sells?
I'm learning what sells. I have definitely popular images that are better than others. And there's some where I'll put out and I'm like, oh, this is one of my favorite shots. It should sell like crazy. Never even sold it once. And it just sits there on the wall and you're just like, okay, time to reduce the price. This thing's making me angry. I got to get it off my wall because I want to put something else up there that might sell. Like it's like gambling. It's like, if you're playing roulette, is the red going to hit this day? Is the black going to hit this day? It just depends. It's your main kind of photos that work and that tend to stick more than others and sell. So you always have those, but then you always have like these other ones that you're kind of floating in and out to see what your next good one. Something I may think is amazing because it was difficult, it's unique, and it's rare for my area. People don't know that. They don't know what the investment into that photo. They just look at the end result and they're like, okay, that's beautiful. I want that on my wall. Some people want to hear the story though, and they want to know like, hey, like, how did you take this? Were you jet ski? I've heard the funniest things, especially in Arizona, like completely away from the ocean. People come up to you, were you on a jet ski when you shot that? Were you surfing when you shot that? You must have a really crazy long lens. I'm like, no, I'm in the water. And they're like, what do you mean you're in the water? And so it's kind of tell the story behind it because there's a lot more to it. And not to knock landscape photography, it's amazing too. I do it, but there's a lot more to it than just setting up a tripod and doing your homework.
100%.
You're shooting a moving subject and you're in a moving subject. It's to me, it's one of the, it would be like being in a car shooting another car moving the other direction. And trying to get the light right. And
with the light changing constantly and surroundings changing constantly, and having to look over your shoulder so another wave doesn't break on your head, and like
it's gonna be difficult. I may go out and shoot a landscape shot and shoot 100 photos, and out of those 100, I keep 10. So what is that? 10% yield. I may go out and shoot 5,000 photos and keep 5. And then maybe one of those makes it to a print.
So I think you've kind of answered a bit of the next question, which was just going to be how selective are you? How like strict are you on what you pick to be in your print store? But I guess maybe I'd evolve that a bit more to just say, especially with the type of waves that you shoot, right? Like, so take that Panthera, for example, or not like just a barrel shot, but some of those ones that are a bit more backwashy, a bit more warped. So when you get home from a session and you're looking at those, like I just know personally, because I shoot a lot of backwash, there could be 10, 20 frames in that sequence. So like, what are the specific things you're looking for to then go, okay, like that's the one that's got all of these elements that I want to, to publish?
I think first and foremost is it sharp? I mean, is it in focus? I mean, when you're shooting a moving subject, you're generally using with like continuous autofocus and stuff like that. Sometimes it does you dirty. Sometimes it'll be back sharp, and all of a sudden one is the one that you want to be completely for some reason your camera's like, no, not today, dude. And it's not sharp. And then the next one is, and you like, that was the money shot that's not sharp. And then I'm the type of guy that just won't force it. I'm like, all right, I'll try again. Delete, boom, try again. There's another way. what was the question again? I just
Oh,
completely.
just all of the elements that you're deciding, like when you're picking maybe one out of a sequence, like what are the things?
Yeah, so my camera is capable of shooting, I think, 10 frames per second. So maybe one of the frame, if I nail everything from start to finish, it's tack sharp. I'm usually looking for that one, the one that sticks out.
Yeah.
I mean, like you were talking about, like a flare or a backwash or like a mutant sort of thing.
Yeah.
I'm usually looking for the apex. So the apex of the point where everything's reaching up and out, and but before it starts to come back down, or gravity gets to it and brings it down.
Yeah.
I think that's usually what I'm looking for. But sometimes I'll take the shots before it.
Yeah.
Because maybe there's a something in there that's unique about it. Maybe the definition and the fan is a little bit better in that one. So I could sit there for 20 minutes between 3 shots to decide which one I think is the best out of the litter. And back to the Panthera shot. I mean, I actually slept on that shot for a really long time. That was not, I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is, and I I shared it on Instagram, and that's when I noticed, okay, the public likes it. I think it's all right, whatever. And then everybody's like, I see a lion. Like, what lion? Like, there's no lion in the wave, I still, to this day, and I've actually had people come up and like take a picture of it and then take it and like mark up an apple and like draw the line in there. I'm like, yeah, no, I think you're reaching, but it sells. People will stop in their tracks and they're like, do you see it? I'm like, I know, a lion, right? Like, yeah, it's a lion. So I named it Panthera, which is Latin for big cat. And it's again, it's a story, it's a talking piece. Whether or not buys it, at least it's stopped in their tracks, and maybe they're going to look at other stuff.
Definitely. I think people are just fascinated about that. I noticed that. Yeah. I noticed that with a lot of backward or anything that's just a bit warped, is because like there's so many people, as you know, that don't even see the ocean very often. And then if they have, they've probably seen a normal barreling wave. But then those situations, especially something that's captured at, a thousandth of a second. So, you're seeing what the eye doesn't see. Like it's definitely fascinating to people. But that's another one that's always interesting, is what translates on social media versus what translates in print. Because I've noticed there's a lot of people will like stuff on social media because it's a cool, interesting thing, but is it something that is going to go on a wall? So that's what I was fascinated about you as a print photographer.
Yeah, I think social media is one of the, I wouldn't say many things, but one of the least many things that social media is good for is testing your ground, testing your market, testing the audience. You're like, I think this is cool. And then again, like, it depends on what type of photography you are. Are you posting stuff because you like it and you don't care what anybody else thinks? I used to be that way. And I hate to admit that now it's like, yeah, you want people to like your stuff or else they're not going to buy it.
Yeah. So with when you come in from a shoot, like what's your process as far as images goes? So I've spoken to a few people on this podcast now, and everyone's kind of got a different process. Are you looking straight away? You're remembering a moment from the shoot and like racing home to kind of go and like find that shot, or do you kind of just let it breathe for a while and go back to it when you're in a different mindset?
No, I mean, I actually try never to look at the back of my camera until I get home, because I can see a mental shot, but since it's on a small little screen, I could get home and blow it up. I'm like, yeah, that whole thing's out of focus. So I don't like to set myself up for failure in that sense. So I'll be like, oh, I remember this wave. Like, I think it's good. And then I get home, I'm like, oh, no, it's not, because it didn't, my focus just took a dump on me. So
but you will generally look at the photos like that day, like you'd go home from a session and have a look at the photo.
Depends on how busy I am. If I got stuff to do, or if it's been a long day, or I try to get everything at least in the day. So if I have a long day of shooting, I try to knock them all out within the day, just to kind of reset and start from scratch whenever I shoot again, because I don't like to have a backlog. I like to keep up with it.
Okay.
I think it helps also remember the story in the moment for the keepers that you do decide to keep. Because if I don't check photos for like a couple days and then I'm like, oh, this was a good session, but I don't really remember how I felt in the moment.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that can actually be a hindrance to the bane of my existence is naming the photo.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
I edit the sick photo and then look at it and go, now what do I name this thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Will you go back to folders, like say you've got a shot, like we've spoken about, like that Pantheron, for example. So we'll just keep like using that as an example. Like, would you go back to that folder at a later date and look at the other 10 frames in that sequence and just see if you feel different about, you know, the shape of the water or how it looks? Or are you kind of, once you've chosen your lot, you're like, you know, moving on to the next one?
Sometimes, but I think once I've chosen one frame out of the sequence or that session,
Yep.
I generally like to choose what I feel is the best of that session. And then if I go back to it a year later, or I'm digging through files, I'm like, okay, I'm bored. Let me see if I can dig up something, you know. And sometimes you'll look at something a little differently. Like, whoa, like pretty good. Let me see what I can do with it. And then I'll go spend an hour on the post-production of it. And then like, nah, you know, I actually don't like this one. And then I'll delete the whole thing. You know, it's a complete waste of like 2 hours.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll do that. I'll sit at a computer for 5 hours and only edit one photo because I tried to edit 4 or 5 or 6 of them and ended up trashing them because the longer I stared at it, the longer I didn't like it, or the longer I didn't like it, or whatever that means. So I guess I'm really my own worst enemy sometimes. Like there could have been times where I trashed something that was actually really good. For me, I was just like, no, doing it for me, you know?
Yeah.
So
yeah, cool. Now you mentioned earlier, and I think I saw it even maybe in another like interview or write-up that you've done, when you've talked about the ocean, maybe if you're shooting at sunset and most of the people on the beach are going home and you're still in the ocean, or maybe early in the morning, and you mentioned it before as that Zen meditative kind of state. So is that like a big thing for you just in general, like in your life? Is that a good part, like, you know, to, as well as, I mean, you're a photographer and you're in there doing your work, but then having that, being immersed in nature and having that time, that meditative time, is that something that kind of just, you know, is beneficial in addition to, you know, shooting photos for work?
100%. Oh yeah. Yeah. That's why I said I won't do weddings or anything like that.
Yeah.
The stress involved with that and dealing with just so many variables with the people and stuff like that. It stresses me out. So the process of taking the photo generally never stresses me out. It does the complete opposite. It makes me feel calm, at ease. Just being in the water, being surrounded by the water. Even the water here is generally pretty cold. I mean, not cold. Like I wear like a 4.3 or a 5.43 with a hood usually 9 months out of the year, and the other, you know, 3 is a spring suit. Maybe 1 month I get to trunk it, but that's like upper 60s for here. So you can't say like, oh, you're getting up at 4 in the morning to go to the beach and the water is 58 degrees and the air is 48 degrees. And you're like, wow, that's Zen. That's people look at you like, no, I'd rather be. So yeah, there's definitely something, even when your body is shivering and you're dealing with the elements, for you to get out there and still find that peace and calm. That's saying a lot about what you're doing. And that goes for a lot of different things, not just being in the ocean. It could go for someone who likes to get up and go run when it's like freezing outside, but that's their thing, you know? I think people, if they can find that thing, whether it's a hobby, exercise, whatever it is, and they can find that, then I think they're doing life better than the people that can't, because they're not able to get that release. And if maybe their release is through other non-positive things like drugs, alcohol, stuff like that. Maybe is how they're doing their release. So for me to have that release I'm pretty thankful for that.
100%. Like I find that as well, because I shoot essentially sunrise most of the time, like here. And I find if it goes, even if there's nothing to shoot and you're just going down and watching the sunrise and getting a coffee and not even getting the camera out, sometimes it's just, if you miss too many of them in a row, it just starts to you notice it just in the rest of your day. So it's a cool thing to have as part of, you know, what we do, that's part of it, that it gets you up at those times and, you know, gets in the water at times that probably other people wouldn't have a reason to if you weren't taking photos. So yeah, cool, man. This has been amazing. So just a couple of, I guess, fun ones to end off on. So I was going to mention, like, what's your favorite wave to shoot locally, but I mean, you mentioned that you've been to Hawaii and stuff as well. So I guess what have been maybe a couple of the favorite waves that you've shot anywhere? And then second part of that, is there any waves that are on your list that you'd love to shoot that you haven't had a chance to yet?
Oh yeah, the second question. I mean, that's a long bucket there.
Just pick a couple.
So the first question, my favorite spot is probably the spot where I shot Panthera. It's a very fickle, funky little reef wave.
Cool. Yeah, you don't have to obviously name it, but yeah, it's cool.
I mean, it is.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah,
it's and there's a lot of variables to it. I mean, it's like it's just one of those places where it's very tide sensitive. So there's only like about an hour window where it really turns on, and then it's done. Either it's too low, too high. And then you need a certain type of swell, like the interval's got to be correct. Of course, the wind's got to be right. The light's got to be right. So for me, when I actually get to shoot that wave, when it's really doing it, which I've gotten it, like if I'm giving it on a scale of 1 to 5, I've gotten it maybe at a 5, like 1 or 2 times. And the other countless times have been somewhere between like a 3 and a 4. So when I really get it like at those really top times, it's really makes me happy, and I'm out there, and I'm really, it's such a, it'll be there for an hour and then gone. Yeah. And then maybe won't see it for the rest of the year. So it's a very sensitive spot. Yeah. And produces some really cool looking waves. And we don't have a lot of reef chunky mutant waves like you guys have, which will lead me to the next question about like bucket list waves. It's pretty much a wave that's a chunky reef wave in Australia, like Cyclops and spots that like Thurston shoots and Trent Slatter and all those guys, they get you know, get at ski and stuff like that. Like those waves have such the power of them, but yet the beauty of them at the same time. Like Pipe's cool and all that stuff, but I don't know. Like I like the more monstrosity mutant crazy things than real perfect things.
No, they're fascinating. And then you mentioned Warren Keelan earlier, but is there any other names you can mention of maybe people that have inspired you? And then another second part of that question, is there anyone local to you that we may not know about that you could like maybe shout out as some photographers that people could check out?
Okay, first answer your question for other inspiration. Definitely Warren Keelan. He just has this like moody and just unique looks at waves in the ocean. You know, Ray Collins, a lot of the Australian guys actually. Pernovsky, epic stuff. And I like his story. Like, you know, I remember watching that guy, and he was just all Apple iPhone and crazy videos. And then he got himself like, you know, he stepped up and got a bigger like, you know, DSLR mirrorless or whatever, and you know, carried that same standard with it. So yeah, a lot of the Australian guys, the Hawaiian guys, respect, you know, like I said, Clark Little, the shore break's cool, but I think for me shooting a lot of shore break and that look, it just, there's not a lot of as much art to it as drawn back longer lens looks and stuff like that. For sure. It's for me, it's harder to nail a shot with the longer lenses than it is to again, I'm not knocking shore break photography. Not at all. It takes, you know, all that stuff. But I think from a photographer strategic and what, for me looking at a shot, like, okay, how difficult was that to get from a camera standpoint versus sticking my arm out, snapping a button, firing away, and for sure. Granted, it's a big ass wave and it looks sick. That's why I like Keelan and some of those other guys. Is that they were using the longer lenses and they were getting depth of field. You know, and that draws to me. It takes a one-dimensional photo and then turns it into a 2D or 3D. Draws and keeps you wanting to keep looking at the photo. 100%. Yeah, shooting a 70 to 200 in the water is not easy going with the movement and everything going on. And then your second question, there's definitely one guy in particular that has been of something that I looked up to and someone that taught me a lot, just because we actually spent a lot of time together in the ocean and then also landscape, is this Stan Moniz.
Oh yeah. Yep. Cool.
He's been,
Awesome.
I mean, I grew up watching bodyboarding videos of this guy, like drop me in Hawaii and stuff like that. So I already knew who he was just through bodyboarding, right?
Yep.
And then he moved out here into Southern California, and then he was one of the first guys out here to do the water photography. And then also like Scotty Carter's another guy who I really looked up to, especially with the inside bodyboarding videos. So there was a couple guys, but Stan in particular has been very, very inspirational and just technique and teaching me things and stuff like that. And so, yeah. So, I mean, for me, he is the ultimate hybrid photographer. Like, he's good at everything he does: video, photography, whether it's scuba diving, whether it's waves, whether it's landscape. He's just kind of like the full rounded package when it comes to photography. And to me, that is something that's really hard to do well.
Yeah.
Like, he always told me, he's like, hey, dive into what you're good at. And it's the waves. So I dive into that. When I try and branch out into other stuff, I'm like, wow, it's hard to have all your ducks in a row for everything.
Yeah.
And so, mad props to him for being an inspiration and then teaching me a lot of stuff along the way when it comes to just standard photography.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really
videographer
cool
too, but I don't want to do video. He's taught me a lot about that, but I'm usually just because I'm like, it's video,
Yeah. 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 So, no, that's amazing. Awesome, man. Cool. Well, thanks so much for this. So what's this year? You got any plans for this year? Is it just
shows? Just
in the shows?
Yep. Yeah. I just recently bought a big cargo van thing and take all my art and all my show stuff, and then also sleep in it as well, and just go to show after show, and then just show my art and go from there, and just put my art in people's homes. And
good on you, man. I respect the hustle. That's unreal. Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much. I hope a few people that I show this to haven't heard of you, because they're going to be pleasantly surprised when they discover your work. And for everyone that knows who you are, it'd be good to get some more insight into you yourself. So thanks so much for your time, man. I really appreciate you coming on.
Likewise, I appreciate the opportunity.
Cool. Thanks, brother.
Cheers.